Hey everyone, this is Caitlin Born-Dohm over at Exit Realty Leaders in Citrus County, Florida. Today is Saturday at 4:52, but this is going to be posted on Friday at 5. Every week, one video, Friday at 5. Anyway, today's topic is going to be what makes a property different. As I explained in my last video, my introductory video, I want this channel to be a resource for real estate. And I'm going to focus on listing properties that are different. Because, there's a lot of properties out there that are different properties, and it can be hard to find their value. It can be hard to find an accurate list price. Like the other day, I encountered a property, 10 acres. There was no other properties in the area with that much land, and the house was a unique sort of house. It needed some upgrades, but anyway, you get the gist. The only other house, on that street, the only other house on that street had significantly less acres, but the house was completely upgraded, a little bit smaller. It's just not an accurate comp. I mean, of course, I'll use it and I'll take that into my CMA or my comparative market analysis when determine the value, but what makes a property different? Obviously, as in my last video, I write my things down because I like to make sure I remember everything. I can be forgetful. So today's video is going to have 5 points. The first point, what makes a property different? 1, lack of comps or comparable properties. So what is a comp? What is a comparable property? A comp is short for comparable, and a comparable property is a property that you're going to use when you're trying to determine the value of a subject property. So the subject property is what we want to find out the worth of. And a comp is the property we use. A comp is one of normally at least 3 properties we use to find that value. So again, it's normally 3 properties when you run a CMA. 3 comps. They need to be, as close in the vicinity as the subject property as possible. We're going to look at what they last sold for and when. So if one property just sold a month ago, and it was on the market for a very brief amount of time, that's going to tell us that, that property was priced right. And if the properties are very similar, if they both got 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, if they both have the same amount of acreage, if they're both updated, if they're both, the same layout, like ranch style or 2-story or what, if they're both the same style. Oh, wow, these properties are very, very similar, and we're going to price them alike because it worked for the last property. Obviously that's not all that goes into it, because you need to look at all the properties on that street and all the properties in the vicinity. It's not even about the median value. It's, how similar can you get to the subject property? And what are those prices? How long did they sit on the market? What did they sell for? Would they sell under asking? Over asking? If you get 3 comparable properties that all sold for, in a $5,000 range, if you get one that sold for $350, $355, and $360, and they do have some slight differences, you kind of compare and contrast those comp properties with the subject property to derive what you're going to list the subject property at. So that's a little brief intro. Again, what makes a property different? Lack of comps. So lack of comps is when you don't have those properties to compare and contrast. Lack of comps, that does make a property different, because it's much harder to determine the value of a property. It's kind of a guessing game. I mean, you do everything you can. You're still going to look at the closest properties, what they sold for and when, how similar they are, but you kind of have to take every comp with a grain of salt then. And you really have to look at that individual property. And in some ways you have to expand your vicinity a little. And you have to see, or even a lot, you have to see, can I find 10 acres anywhere else? What was that listed for? Was there a house on that lot? How many square feet was it? The property I mentioned earlier with the 10 acres, it needed a lot of updates, but it was like 2,100 square feet. That's a big house, so it's got a lot of potential, But a house that needs that many upgrades and repairs, it's also going to have a heavier price tag than a smaller house. So, those are the things you have to take into consideration. And I won't drag you through it all here. But just to give you an example, that's the first point. What makes a property different? Lack of comps or comparable properties. So the second point, number 2, what makes a property different? Lots of upgrades done with or without a permit. So if you took a regular house in a regular neighborhood and none of those other houses really changed much, but there was one house that did. Those owners went in there, they renovated it, they remodeled it, they completely changed the inside, they added all kinds of new features and stuff, with or without a permit. That changes things. Because that house is no longer the same. It's no longer a cookie cutter house. Suddenly it's a very different property, and you have to take into account, every single upgrade. How much did those cost on average? If you got them for a deal, if those upgrades were done for a deal, that's great for the owner, but, what do they cost on average? They could stand to make some money on that. So that's a great thing for a seller. That's something they love to hear. And when I say with or without a permit, that has to be taken into account. The other day I ran across a property that I was showing. It had gotten a new roof, and it was done without a permit. Now, a roof is one of the most high value features you can add. It's a roof. It's thousands and thousands of dollars. It's one of the most expensive things to replace on a house, and it's been the killer of many deals because a roof is so serious. Now, if you replace a roof, but you did it without a permit, like I saw in this other house, that house is likely not going to be insurable. Uh-oh. A house with a brand new roof, normally a really marketable attribute, just became a problem. Because this has to be rectified. Either a cash buyer is going to come in and buy that house and just not insure it, which is a lower likelihood and probably not advisable either, because of what if a fire happens? The fire can happen in the blink of an eye. Someone with the loan, surely that needs to be rectified, and there's costs to that. There's costs to these permits and inspections, and it's just one of those things. That makes a property different when upgrades or features were added that the other neighbors didn't, or that just are out of the ordinary, if that makes sense. So, number 3, the third trait that makes a property different is a custom home in a pretty cookie cutter neighborhood. Someone could have bought a lot, and instead of conforming to, what seemed to be the building style of the neighborhood, they said, nope, okay, we're doing something else. All these homes are 1 story, screw it, we're doing 2. All these homes have, older appliances, we're doing stainless steel. Oh, these houses have, a shingle roof, we're going to do a metal one. You know what I mean? And that makes it tricky because that house is now completely different. It's a custom home. And you can't really use those comparable properties. I mean, sure, you can garner an idea of the value of the neighborhood, but it's another one of those things. Custom homes especially are very tricky to price. Extremely tricky to price. Because a lot of times custom homes have, a lot of those lesser talked about upgrades that still have quite a cost that aren't normally accounted for. So you can have a custom home listed for 50 to 100 grand higher than every other house in the neighborhood, and that might be totally justified based on, the custom home's features. And a lot of people will look at it and say, oh my gosh, what's going on? Why is this one so much higher? And sometimes that will scare buyers away, sometimes it won't. But it does make a property different. It especially when someone comes to view the home, they see, all these homes in a similar style, and you have this home that stands out. So, oh, okay, well, I see why it's different, I see what's different in price. You walk inside, and, it's like a wonderland in there. So that makes a property different. A custom home, all custom homes are different properties. They really are. There's nothing cookie cutter about a custom home. And that's part of the beauty of them, But it definitely makes them different. It definitely makes them a little bit harder to price. So the fourth thing, the fourth trait that makes a property different is when a lot of the features or upgrades that were done are not the norm. So I'll give you an example. Stainless steel. Very common upgrade. It's a very common upgrade. Who doesn't, upgrade their house to their appliances to stainless steel at one point? Well, not everyone. The other day, I was at a listing, most of the appliances were stainless steel, but they had an industrial fridge. So the fridge was much larger than a regular fridge, and the doors were not stainless steel, they were glass, like glass, real glass. So you could see everything inside the fridge, everything was perfectly organized. It was beautiful. It was like a friggin' IKEA kitchen. I loved it. And their kitchen, it would also happen to be a custom home, but their kitchen floor, instead of a hardwood tile, laminate, whatever, their kitchen floor was pavers. And it's things like that. It's like, whoa, never seen this in a house before. How are we going to price this? How much is this worth? Or, wow, this is possible. This has happened before, but not many times. Let's figure out what this is worth. It's always possible to find the value of a property, but again, different properties, you can't just walk into a different sort of property and just, I think it's this. Different sort of properties, require lots of research. Different properties require lots of, analyzing. Different sorts of properties, require a lot of careful, conversations about the upgrades and pulling out those receipts. How much did this cost? How much? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like the other day, I stumbled across a 2-story waterfront home, which doesn't sound that all uncommon. It really doesn't. But here in Florida, even though you do see them, they're definitely not the majority. And sometimes you'll see like a 2-story waterfront home, and all the other homes are 1-story. Or they might not all be stilt homes, or maybe some are stilt homes, or maybe some are, wood, or maybe some are completely different material. And it's like, whoa, this property doesn't look like any of the other properties. Okay, all right, well, let's get in here. Let's take our time. Let's really make sure we figure out what this property's worth. And the last trait that makes a property different, and this is one of the most important traits, number five. What makes a property different? Sellers in a unique situation. Who makes the property different? Sellers. Sellers do. The property doesn't make itself different. Sellers make the property different. And when sellers are in a tricky situation, whether it be financial or something in their personal life, suddenly that house might have a little more contingencies, so to speak. If the seller's asking buyers to pay closing costs, that makes the property different. That's not the norm. It happens, but it's not the norm. Or let's say a seller needs to move, at a very certain time. So closing, possession, the time of possession might not be at closing. That makes the property different because most properties possession is at closing. Or let's say, sellers need to do a lease back agreement. So even after they close on the sale, they still need to live in it, and rent it out from the new owners for a couple months while they figure out what they're doing. That makes the property different. That's not the norm. And they're all things you have to take into consideration as well. You don't just take a property with all sorts of contingencies and ask, $100 million for it. You got to be fair. You got to realize what you're putting on the market, because we want your home, your listing to sell like in a snap, faster than lightning. And we want your house to sell for as much money as possible. You know, we want to get what it's worth. Why would we want to leave money on the table? You know, real estate's one of the best investments. It deserves to be treated with care. Unfortunately, a lot of agents can be lazy. If you're an agent watching this, don't be that agent. Don't be like all the others. Take your time with pricing. It's so important. It's so important to get priced right the first time, because when a listing first hits that market, it can never get that newness back. It can never get that newness back. So again, when it comes to different properties in unique situations, that's why pricing is that much more important. That's why it's that much more important to run many detailed CMAs. Why it's so important to research every little upgrade, every little feature, the whole neighborhood, what all those houses are like. Just to give you a gist. So I'm not sure how long this video is. It's probably going a little bit over my time. But if you watch this all the way through, thank you so much. I really look forward to next week's video. Again, thank you for watching. Bye.